people like me still have to fight just to be heard. Elijah's voice cracked mid-sentence, but it wasn't from nerves. It was from holding too much in for too long. He stood in front of 20 pairs of eyes, most of them white, most of them already looking bored. A discussion on civil rights had somehow turned into a silent test. Would he speak? Would he dare? He did, but as soon as the words left his mouth, the room tensed, not outwardly. No one yelled, but he felt it, the tightening, the shift. A boy in the back whispered something. A girl stifled a giggle. Elijah's stomach flipped, but he held his ground. I'm saying, he continued, voice shakier now, that racial injustice didn't end in the 60s. Some of us still live it, Elijah. The voice came hard and cold. Mr. Denton, his history teacher. Elijah paused. His hands trembled. Wrap it up. The words weren't loud, but they were final, and just like that, the air was gone from the room. Bang. Mr. Denton slammed his hand down on the desk so hard a pen rolled off. Everyone jumped. This isn't your soapbox, Elijah. Sit down before you embarrass yourself more. Gasps. A pause. Then the snickers started, whispered laughs. Eyes that refused to meet Elijah's. He stood frozen. I was just, he began. But Mr. Denton cut him off again. You're not here to teach, you're here to learn. Don't confuse the two. The word learn tasted bitter in Elijah's ears. Learn what? To stay quiet, to shrink, to nod along when history was sanitized and neutral. He looked around. No one said anything. Not even the kids who liked his poetry. Not even the ones who reposted BLM stories last summer. His face was hot. His throat burned. But worst of all, his truth was still there, caught in his chest like it was choking him. The sound started small. Someone coughed to cover it. Then came the laughter, light, controlled, but unmistakable, so dramatic. Someone whispered under their breath, "Here he goes again." Elijah scanned the room. No one looked at him directly. They looked through him, past him, like he'd become a punchline with a pulse. One girl leaned into her friend and whispered something. They both laughed with their hands over their mouths. He knew that laugh. He'd grown up hearing it when he mispronounced a word, when he wore Payless shoes to school, when he answered to smart in a room that didn't expect it from him. It wasn't funny, it was surgical, and today it cut deeper than usual. Elijah's legs moved before his brain did. He sank into his seat, slow and heavy. The room moved on like nothing happened. Someone raised their hand. Mr. Denton called on them immediately. A girl shared a quote from Dr. King that sounded hollow after what just happened. No one looked at Elijah, but inside, he was screaming, his fists clenched under the desk. His eyes blinked hard against the sting. He thought about standing up again, saying it louder, saying anything, but he already knew how that would go. In this school, speaking up was a risk, and being black meant they'd never call it bravery. They'd just call it trouble. The bell rang. Students packed up. Elijah didn't move. His eyes dropped to the notebook, still open on his desk. The page stared back at him. At the top, in shaky, angry handwriting, it read, "My voice matters, even when they try to silence it." He ran his thumb over the words like a scar. He could still hear Mr. Denton's voice in his head, still hear the laughter, still feel the heat in his face. But something inside him shifted, not broken, just cracked open, because even now, especially now, he knew the truth. If he stayed quiet forever, they'd win, and he would vanish. Don't shrink today. Elijah whispered it into the bathroom mirror like a prayer, low, cracked barely a sound. He tugged the collar of his uniform straight and stared at himself. The mirror didn't talk back, but it didn't lie either. What it showed was a black teen trying to make himself smaller in a space that never asked him to exist. His reflection looked tired, not from lack of sleep, from restraint. It was always like this before school. A pep talk wrapped in fear. The hallway stares. The raised eyebrows when he used big words. The way the word attitude followed him like a shadow even when he smiled. He adjusted his tie again. Too tight, too loose. Didn't matter. He grabbed his notebook and headed for the door, repeating it one last time in his head. Don't shrink today. But he already felt himself folding. Let the words protect you. That's what Miss Alma always said. She was more than a grandmother. She was the reason Elijah believed in anything at all. A retired librarian who'd stacked his childhood with Baldwin, Angelou, Hughes, Hooks. She gave him poems instead of lullabies, when the world felt too white, too loud, too unfair. Miss Alma handed him a pen. They can't take what you write, baby. Elijah remembered her saying that after his first detention, when a teacher had called him disruptive for asking too many questions. At home, there was no punishment, just warm food, steady eyes, and a quiet voice telling him, "You are not the problem. You are the revolution they don't want to see coming." He didn't need to look around to know it. He was always the only one. Only black kid in AP history. Only one at the debate team meetings. Only one walking through hallways lined with old portraits. None of them looked like him. Every day felt like auditioning to exist. Smiling without sounding fake. Speaking up without sounding aggressive. Wearing sneakers without being urban. And no matter how high his grades were, he could still hear the difference in how they said his name. Elijah, with a pause. A weight like even that felt too heavy for them. So he walked like glass, never too loud, never too fast, and still, somehow, always too much. This is powerful, Elijah, but maybe tone it down a little. Ms. Kim held his painting like it was on fire. It showed a black boy with duct tape over his mouth, standing in front of the American flag. Elijah didn't say anything. "I just don't want people to misread your intention," she added. "They already think you're angry." There it was. He'd heard that word too many times. Angry. As if being honest was a threat. As if emotion disqualified him from being right. He nodded politely, took the canvas back, but that night he repainted the same image. Only this time, the tape on the boy's mouth was ripped in half. "We appreciate your submission, Elijah, but..." The email cut off there in his mind. The rest didn't matter. His spoken word video, the poem he'd stayed up 3 nights perfecting, was rejected from the talent show. The excuse, "It's a little too political for this audience," but someone strumming 3 out-of-tune chords and humming a love song made the final lineup. Elijah had watched the auditions. The boy forgot his lyrics twice. Elijah sat at his desk, jaw tight, too political. His poem was about surviving silence, about what it felt like to speak up and be punished for it, about being black and brilliant in a world that only wants you quiet. But here, that truth was apparently offensive. He stared at the rejection notice again, at the words that tried to sound polite while pressing a hand over his mouth. And for the first time in weeks, Elijah didn't want to write back. He wanted to scream, "We get it, Elijah." Mr. Denton's voice carried that same tight smile he always used when he was uncomfortable. But maybe try not to make everything about race. Yeah. Elijah blinked. He hadn't raised his voice. He'd just asked why the textbook only dedicated a single paragraph to Malcolm X, but 3 full pages to Reagan. It's a valid question, Elijah said. Sure, Denton replied, nodding condescendingly. But not everything is. A crusade. There it was. That word, that tone, that dismissal. Every time Elijah tried to bring real-world racial injustice into the classroom, it was reduced to drama, like he was pulling focus, like history was supposed to be safe and sanitized. Elijah glanced around the room. No one looked up. Just a few eye rolls. Some smirks. He swallowed the lump in his throat. Because here, the truth made people uncomfortable, and discomfort was the one thing this school never tolerated. Look out. It's Malcolm X Jr. laughter. Not cruel, just loud enough to sting. Elijah didn't even turn around. He knew the voice. Tyler, lacrosse, captain, always joking. Are you plotting the revolution after class or what? More chuckles. Someone added, all power to Elijah, with a fist in the air. Mocking. Elijah wanted to say something sharp, something that would shut it down. But instead, he just walked. Faster. The jokes weren't new. The way they hid behind just playing, that was the camouflage, the safety net. But Elijah felt every jab like a bruise, because the truth, they didn't fear him. They just liked reminding him he didn't belong. 5 times, Elijah counted. 5 times he'd raised his hand in class. 5 times, Mr. Denton called on someone else, someone who always had less to say. Elijah didn't want praise, he just wanted room. But the pattern was becoming harder to ignore. Every question he asked became a risk. Every insight, a step closer to the label they all silently pinned on him: angry, disruptive, difficult. Even when he followed the rules, even when he softened his tone. It was like he was invisible by design. He stopped raising his hand after that, because what was the point of reaching up when no one ever reached back? I just feel like I'm being ignored on purpose, Elijah said, voice controlled. The counselor nodded slowly, too slowly. I hear you, she said, then added, but maybe try adjusting your tone. People shut down when they feel accused. He stared at her, so it's my fault they're uncomfortable. Her silence answered everything. He stood up, thanked her, anyway, and walked out. Because being dismissed with a smile was still being dismissed that night. Elijah didn't talk to anyone. He opened his notebook, and he wrote, not for a grade, not for a show, not for their approval. Poems poured out like gasoline, furious, sharp, alive. Because if he couldn't speak in their world, he'd burn it down on his own. And still, they say we're free. The mic cut out midline, sharp, brutal. Elijah blinked, tapped it once. Nothing. Static silence. He looked toward the sound booth. The AV kid shrugged, eyes wide, confused, or pretending, from the edge of the stage. He saw Principal Sharp mouthing something to a staff member, a quick shake of the head. No, no, no. No. Elijah stepped closer to the front, heart thudding in his chest. My voice matters, he said. Louder now, even if you cut the mic. A few murmurs in the audience. Some students shifted in their seats. Phones were already out. He opened his mouth to finish the poem. Anyway, but the auditorium lights flicked on, blinding. That's enough, a voice echoed from backstage. Elijah stood frozen, throat tight, the words clawing to escape. This was supposed to be the diversity assembly, the safe space. He'd been approved. His piece was screened, edited, sanitized, but now live and wrote a reel. Too black, too loud. He looked down at the mic in his hand. Dead silence, and his truth, once again erased. Thank you, Elijah, for your ... passion. Principal Sharp stepped out smiling, microphone in hand. His voice boomed across the auditorium. Let's give him a hand, folks. Polite applause, shallow, confused. Some students clapped, others just stared. Elijah stood still, the poem half finished. Pride, half born. Humiliation fully formed. We value student voices here. The principal continued, as if the last 2 minutes hadn't just crushed one. Elijah looked at him, looked past him, looked out into the sea of students and teachers who wouldn't meet his eyes. He took a shaky step back, then another. The principal reached out with a hand on his shoulder, gently guiding him off stage. You made your point, he whispered. Let's not make this a thing. It was a thing. A mic cutting out mid-sentence. A school silencing pain they had invited on stage. A boy being uninvited from his own story. Elijah didn't speak, didn't push back. He just walked, because sometimes, even when you scream your truth into the world, they turn down the volume. The hallway after the assembly buzzed, not loud, low, whispery. Elijah passed lockers and sideways glances. A few students murmured, but no one looked directly at him. One girl mouthed, sorry, then turned away. That was the worst part. Not the mic cutting, not the principal's fake smile, the silence, the complete absence of outrage. No one stood up, no one walked out. No one called it what it was. Racial injustice in real time. He sat on the edge of the fountain outside the auditorium, holding his folded paper, the poem that never got to finish. He read the last line under his breath. We shout until hoarse, hoping someone finally listens. He looked up. No one was listening. The office smelled like old printer ink and erasers. Elijah, we're concerned about your behavior at today's assembly. Mrs. Langston, the assistant principal, spoke gently. Too gently. It was disruptive, emotional. That's not the tone we agreed on. Tone, that word again. Elijah's stomach churned. You cut my mic, he said evenly. In the middle of my poem, she offered a small, condescending smile. It was a technical error, he scoffed. It was censorship. That wiped the smile from her face. This isn't about politics, she snapped. It's about professionalism. You turned a school event into a protest. No parent call, no record, just a soft threat disguised as concern. Take the rest of the day, she said. Maybe reflect. Reflect. He didn't need reflection. He needed someone to admit what just happened. He dumped the notebook on his bed. Pages spilled out. His poems, his rage, his questions, his voice. He stood there shaking, one hand clenched, one already reaching for the matchbook on his desk. They didn't want it. Any of it. They didn't want Elijah. Not his truth. Not his fire. Not his presence. He grabbed the pages, one by one, tore them down the middle, threw them into the trash. All of it is late nights, his heartbreak, his voice gone. Almost his hand froze on the last page. Unheard, one word at the top. A draft. The poem he hadn't even finished yet. He pulled it from the trash, smoothing out the wrinkles. The paper was torn at the corner, but the title still stared up at him like a dare. His breath hitched. Maybe they didn't want to hear him, but someone out there might need to. Bro, check this. Look what they did to Elijah. The video was only 23 seconds long. It started mid-line. They say, "We're free," then click, mic off. The silence was louder than the poem. Then came the push-off Principal Sharp's smile. The look in Elijah's eyes. By lunchtime, it had 70K views. By third period, 500,000. Caption, they silenced him for speaking the truth. Watch this. Someone had filmed it. A classmate, from the third row, posted it on TikTok with nothing but the hashtag. Hashtag let Elijah speak, then the duet started. One creator, tearful, whispered, "This is every black kid who raised their hand and got ignored." Another stitched the clip. Cut the mic but, not the message. It wasn't just a video anymore. It was a mirror, and millions were finally looking. It didn't take long. Black creators, poets, teachers, students, everyone was stitching the video with their own stories. This happened to me in 6th grade. I was told my anger made people uncomfortable. They always say it's not the right time. The comments poured in like rain. This young king speaks for all of us. That pain, I've felt it too. The mic died, but his voice just woke the world up. Each post kept the flame alive, and then someone tagged Kerry Washington. Elijah was scrolling, still in disbelief, when his phone dinged notification at Kerry Washington mentioned you in a tweet. His thumb froze, eyes wide. She had posted the video. This young man's words shook me. I want to hear the full poem. Elijah, if you see this, reach out. The tweet had already gone viral. Thousands of shares. Celebrities retweeting. Writers, journalists. He reread it 10 times. His stomach flipped. He tapped out a DM. "Hi Ms. Washington. My name's Elijah. That was my poem. Thank you for hearing it." Less than 5 minutes later, "Elijah, your voice is beautiful. Would you come visit us in rehearsal? We're working on a new play about silence and identity. I'd be honored." For the first time in days, he exhaled. The TV played the news on low volume, but the caption was loud. Broadway star reaches out to teen poet silenced at assembly. Miss Alma stared at the screen, hand on her chest. Then slowly she began to cry. She pulled Elijah close, burying her face into his shoulder. "Baby," she whispered, "you shook the world." He didn't say much, just held her. This was the woman who handed him Baldwin-like breakfast, who made him repeat, "I am somebody," before every school day. She'd seen him silenced now. She was seeing him. He stood in front of the cast. His palms were sweating. His knees felt like paper. Kerry gave him a small nod. "Whenever you're ready." Elijah looked down at the page, then up and began. "They teach you to write, but not to roar. They call it a speech when it's quiet, a protest when it's true." His voice didn't shake this time. Line after line poured from him, words the school had cut, censored, and crushed. And still, he spoke. When he finished, the room was still. Kerry wiped her eyes. Kerry stepped forward, arms open. "That was soul, Elijah." She hugged him tight. "The world needs this. May I share your poem on stage, with your name?" Elijah looked down at his shoes, then at his page, then at her. His voice cracked, but held. "Please, let them hear me." She smiled. "They will. My name is Elijah," Kerry Washington said, standing center stage beneath the lights. "This poem is his." And then she read it. They called it disruption. I called it breathing. They said too loud. I was never loud enough to live. Each word hit like thunder. Each pause held a generation of voices denied by the final. line, the room erupted. Standing ovation, tears, applause that refused to end. Backstage, Kerry looked up and whispered, "This is for every kid they tried to keep quiet." And somewhere, Elijah smiled through the silence. "You see that?" Miss Alma's hand trembled as she held Elijah's. He watched from the wings, eyes wide, chest heavy. On screen, teen poet silenced at Schoolinard on Broadway. Hashtag Let Elijah Speak was now a movement. Outside his school, protesters held signs. "Silence is violence. Let them speak." Reporters asked, "How does it feel to be heard?" Elijah didn't answer. He just looked at the crowd, the signs, Miss Alma, and whispered to himself, "They finally see me." He walked back into the classroom that once erased him. Same walls, same desk, but this time something was different. On the wall framed behind glass was his poem, titled Unheard. Author, Elijah Brooks. The silence was still there, but it no longer scared him. He placed his hand over his chest, eyes locked on the frame. "They heard me. You just watched what racial injustice looks like in real time." Elijah stood up and they tried to shut him down. Drop a fire emoji if his voice hits your heart. Comment heard if you've ever been dismissed for telling the truth. Don't scroll in silence. Speak loud. Share louder.